whoever takes the chair, whoever's vice chair, can you just bear with us on names? Because my eyes aren't brilliant. I can just get a few there. Okay. And we'll get the meeting going, okay? Thank you. Right, Hazel's going to take us through the start of the meeting just to do the first couple of items. Thank you.
Welcome to this morning's Adult Select Committee. The first agenda item is to note the appointment of the chair. The council appointed the chairs across the select committees, so today's chair will be Councillor Simon Howarth, and he will be chairing for the remainder of this year. And then we need to move on to apologies for absence, declarations of interest, and appointing a vice chair. So, Chair, would you like to appoint the vice chair?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Adult Select Committee, our first meeting. Good morning to new members also, and bear with us. I am a fair chair. Put your hand up, please, if you want to speak, and I will allow you to come back in. But we have to aim at questions. I don't want any statements and whatever. But we're very fair, and I will allow you to come back in on a second go if you think about something, okay? And I will remember your names eventually. Just bear with me, okay? Right, can we look for a vice chair just in case something happens to myself or whatever? Do I have any nominations, please? Ruth?
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to being our new chair on Adult Select. I would like to nominate Roger Harris as Vice Chair.
Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Rob?
Thank you for the honour, Chair, but I was Vice Chair of the committee for the previous 5 years, and I think it's about time somebody else had a go. Thank you.
Okay, Ruth, sorry about that one. Do we have anybody else who'd like to be Vice Chair? Okay, looks like we're struggling. What we'll do is we'll defer that because I am available for the next meeting. I would like a vice chair as quickly as possible so you can have a chat between yourselves. We do have an apology, or we've got one or two this morning.
Good morning, Chair. Yeah, we've got an apology for absence from Councillor Jane Pratt.
And we are one member short of this select as well. So there's two. Can you have a chat between yourselves when we have a minute so we can look for a vice chair for the next meeting? Is that okay with everyone? It is important. I understand, Roger. Yep, you've had 5 years of the last administration. Okay. I think we're allowed to move on without a vice chair. Right. Do I have apologies for absence? Sorry again for that, Wendy.
Yes, it's County Councillor Jane Pratt.
Okay. For public record, if you do apologise for the meeting, you make sure you either email myself, Hazel, the clerk, or Democratic Services, so we do have it on record, okay? Right, I'm just going to go around the table quickly while we are live streaming. Got some new members, as I said, welcome. I've got officers with me today as well, so I'll start with myself. I'm Simon Howarth. I represent Llanelli Hill, Clydach and Gilwan area. I've been 13, 14 years now as a county councillor, and this is the first time I've ever sat with adults.
I'm Hazel Eilert, and I'm in charge of scrutiny at Monmouthshire.
Good morning, I'm Wendy Barnard, Democratic Services Officer.
I'm Claire Marchant, I'm Chief Officer for Social Care and Health.
Shirley Wigham, Senior Strategy and Policy Officer for Housing.
Councillor Paul Pavia, Chepstow Town Councillor, County Councillor, apologies, for Larkfield.
Councillor Louise Brown, Councillor for Sharney Ward.
County Councillor Roger Harris, Crossallen Ward in Abergavenny, a member of this committee.
County Councillor Lisa Dimmock, the Elms Endy.
I'm Martin Grokert. I'm new to the council and to this committee. I represent the Lansdowne Ward in Abergavenny.
Good morning, everyone. I'm County Councillor Ruth Edwards, representing Latilio Cresceni, and I'm actually a member of this committee, and I've been on the Adults Committee now since 2004. So I think it's a good committee to be on, obviously. Thank you.
So you've never been vice chair? Oh, we've got experience as well, Ruth. Sorry, Ruth.
Mark Howcroft, Assistant Head of Finance.
Tyrone Stokes, Finance Manager for Social Care and Health.
Good morning, welcome everyone. Agenda item number 4, declarations of interest, as and when. Can we please make sure our mics are switched off, please? Councillor Brown. Any declarations, as and when? If you feel you need to speak out, something happens where you feel that it does have an interest, put your hand up and we'll sort that out. Agenda item number 5, open public forum. We do not have any members of the public with us this morning, so we'll move on to agenda item number 6 to confirm the minutes of the following meetings. 6.1, special meeting held on the 4th of April 2017. Do I have a proposer and a seconder that they are true and accurate record?
I'll propose and
Proposer Ruth?
correct, yes.
Seconder Roger? Okay. Is there any actions from them minutes, both? Roger?
Thank you, Chair. There are action points that we come to later in the agenda, I believe, Chair.
Right, thank you. Can we all agree it's a true and accurate record by 2 members? Thank you. 6.2, Adult Select Committee held on the 11th of April 2017. God, you had a busy week then. Well done. Do we have a true and accurate record of proposal and seconder, please?
Yes, we do, and I believe I'm the only member that was present, actually.
No seconder. I think legally we can accept them. Have you any action points from them minutes, Ruth? Okay. Thank you. Right. Can we move on to agenda item number 7, social housing grant programme? And this morning we have Shirley Wigham. Can you just introduce yourself, Shirley, as reference to what your position is and what you do, etc., etc.? Thank you.
I'm Shirley Wigham. I manage the social housing grant programme. Well, it is, maybe it's not working.
You need to speak really into it,
Shirley.
I'm Shirley Wigham. Is that better? No?
Move along to that one.
Shirley Wigham. Is that better? Yeah.
Continue shouting at me, Shirley.
I am Senior Strategy and Policy Officer in Housing, and I manage the social housing grant programme. The purpose of this report today is to update committee on last year's programme and to show you the programme for the next 3 years. We've achieved full spend of our allocation of 1.14 million, and we successfully bid for an extra 2.6 million, and that took our spend to 3,207,228, which is our best year for quite some time. We completed 87 units. Amongst that was an adapted bungalow. We've got 3 more adapted bungalows in the pipeline, 2 in Abergavenny, they're for severely disabled children, and 1 in Caldecott for a severely disabled child. We're also working closely with our social care colleagues to provide housing for their vulnerable clients. We have 5 apartments in Abergavenny currently under construction. They're for clients of the learning disability team. These will be completed in January next year, and we have 4 apartments and an adapted bungalow planned for Caldecott, again for the learning disability team. We hope to be able to deliver a lot more. We're going to look at housing for people with mental health issues next, I think. To help to meet the target of 20,000 additional affordable homes over the next the term of the present administration of the Welsh Government, they've made a lot more money available over the next 3 years. Our allocation for the next 2 years is over 5 million. They've decided to split this between social housing grant and housing finance grant. 60% of each scheme will be social housing grant and 40% will be housing finance grant. And then in the 3rd year, our allocation drops back down to 1.9 million, although it is anticipated that more money will be made available by the time we reach that. If you need to know the difference between the SHG and the HFG, SHG is a capital grant and the housing finance grant is a revenue funded scheme. The Welsh Government pays towards the interest and the capital repayments. The RSL takes the debt and then they get that help. So over the 30-year period, they are in the same position as if they had grant up front. Obviously, all of the RSLs would prefer to have the capital grant. So what the Welsh Government has done this year is introduce blending and making every scheme have to have part social housing grant, part housing finance grant, just to make it equitable for all of the RSLs. The programme delivery plan is appended to the report. It gives the details of each of the schemes over the 3 years and shows the reserve and potential schemes that we've got that we can bring forward as and when more money is available or when they reach a deliverable stage. With the help of our Rural Housing Enabler, we are constantly looking for more developable land to increase delivery because we are struggling a bit with our numbers at the moment.
Okay, Shirley, thank you. Do I have any questions? Councillor Brown?
In terms of the grants supplied that you've mentioned, is any account taken of the difference between the affordability of land in different particular areas and obviously the need for possibly more funding in certain areas than one local authority as opposed to another in terms of the social housing grant, the housing finance grant? Could you explain how this works? Thank you.
Yes, all of the grant is based on the Welsh Government's acceptable cost guidance document. That means that each area of each county is in a different band, and they're all based on your market prices. It's based on your market prices. So in Monmouthshire we have 3 bands. Band 3, which is Llanelli Hill, Band 4, which is quite a bit of the area, Abergavenny, Severn side area, and then the higher value areas, Band 5. So they do get more grant in different areas depending where they're building.
Okay, Roger.
Thanks, Chair. Once again, congratulations to Shirley. She manages to spend everything we're allowed and grab stuff from other people that don't want to spend it, which I can't imagine why they don't. So keep up the good work, Shirley. That's what I say.
Forgive me if this is the wrong place to ask the question. I'm a new boy finding my feet. But my particular ward is a ward that is comprised of almost all social housing in Lansdowne and Abergavenny. And I was wondering how many people are waiting for social housing, particularly young parents with young children. And in Abergavenny in particular, just thinking about my own people in my ward, is there too long a waiting list for social housing?
Well, there's over 3,000 households on the housing register at the moment. I don't know the exact figure for Abergavenny, but it usually runs around the 700 mark. We can never match the need. We just can never build that amount. But we do have a big site coming up, one of the strategic sites in Abergavenny, where they're going to start building soon, so there will be some more homes coming to Abergavenny.
Okay, supplementary, yeah.
It's more of a new question rather than a supplementary, but in the sustainable element of the report, it talked about the requirement to cut down mature trees in some of the projects. Could I have an assurance that where trees are cut down, they will be replaced by planting of new trees rather than a loss of environmental things?
I think the person was sitting next to you on planning, and she could probably address
Thank you,
that.
Chair. Yeah, generally, if there are trees that have to be removed, they are generally, it could be in a different area, but they would be replaced with appropriate planting.
Thank you. You want to come in, Ruth?
Yes, considering obviously that we don't make more land, and land is always the issue for building, there's more demand all the time. Is there ever a likelihood that the RSLs would be purchasing rundown properties or something so that we could have more homes available for those that are in desperate need?
Our RSL partners, especially Monmouthshire Housing Association, already do that. They have a programme for buying back right to buys that were sold in the past. And if I have any grant available, I will say to them, could you go and get another 3 or 4, because we've got some grant that we could use for that. So we get them to buy back some of our the disabled adapted properties we couldn't get. We couldn't build quickly enough, and we bought 2 bungalows and had them adapted. So we do that if the property, especially if it was an ex-council property, so it does meet the standards, space standards that are required, we do try to get them back.
Okay, Ruth.
Thank you very much for that,
Pavel.
Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the programme delivery plan, obviously the development at Maybe Bridge, clearly there is significant demand in Chepstow, and obviously it was very disappointing to have only 18 units. Can you just possibly give some background why that was reduced, and what the and are there any other areas earmarked in Chepstow for social housing in the future? Are there any other plots of land that may be already earmarked?
Well, we have got 38 affordable units coming on the Osborne Paint Factory site. They're on site at the moment. I wasn't involved in the negotiations for Maybe Bridge. Mark Hand did all that, but the site just simply wasn't viable because there's huge issues with being a brownfield site. We have made grant available, and what we're going to do is have 2 parcels of land at a reduced cost. And then we'll use the grant to build the affordable housing. But other than that, there's no other site that I know of at the moment.
Okay. Mark, you just want to come in on that one?
Yeah, I might be able to provide a useful perspective from a finance point of view. Where there is any piece of land, generally there's a negotiation around the size of abnormals, etc., and where those abnormals are excessively large, it's usually the affordable housing that becomes the negotiating point around having to give on that to be able to make the development viable to the developer. Historically, developers are looking at profits of the order of about 20% on any development. I think our challenge into this next administration is how we might actually eat into that and retain our affordable housing numbers, but it's not a particularly easy aspect to do, and it's not the traditional way that developers are used to working. So one of the interesting sites to look at is probably the Crick Road development, whereby we're working with Mellon Homes, and actually they're reducing their profit element down to about 12%. Clearly, once we've started to set the precedent with some in terms of Monmouthshire, then it might be easier to take that forward.
But let's be clear though, sites do have a premium, and at the end of the day we do set policy and we have a toolkit which we go out. And I think Roger from previous, when we looked at affordable homes as well, is it's okay for the developers, and don't forget some of these developers, these big names, I won't say anything, I mean, they're land rich they are, and how they can negotiate with us to not deliver where our policy says actually strikes bad with a lot of people. And I do feel sometimes it does actually wreck everything we've spent doing in the last probably 5-10 years in trying to deliver affordable homes. Shirley made the point, we've got 3,000 there waiting. We're not tough enough with them. I think we should chuck the toolkit out. That's my view. Either deliver on the mandate or you don't deliver at all. And the worry I have is we do have sites which are Monmouthshire County Council sites. Does that mean we're going to sell them off cheaper? Because then these large developers will actually think, well, we'll give you more affordable homes. I think we should stick to what the policy says. Am I right, Shirley, in saying that the LDP we adopted in 2012, was that right, Roger? 12? Yes, it was. No, was it 14? We actually had to up the affordable homes because we never delivered on the UDP. So we're just making problems for ourselves, and it's about time actually we stuck to the guns of that is what the policy is. Because don't forget, some of these larger sites, if memory serves me, tell me whether I'm wrong, a lot of the sites, the bigger sites, they were reduced affordable homes also. If you go to the rural areas, you've got to deliver 60% on a lot of them sites. I think some of these bans that we had, they were 25% on the large sites, which is probably a let-off for some of them. And if they can't deliver on that as well, it does cause us a problem. But we are where we are, and as I say, I think we just keep pressing for trying to deliver on them sites. Do we have any more questions? Yes, Councillor Brown?
Yes, I think one of the areas I'm concerned about is obviously there's the LDP, and there's provisions there with regard to affordable housing in rural areas. But it seems as if the excuse of paying something off-site is allowed. For example, if the site is seen to be awkward, but somehow that argument doesn't apply. It doesn't seem to be awkward enough to get. They can still get private housing in there, but they seem to have a difficulty in getting affordable housing into the same site. So obviously in rural areas, people need to have affordable housing for their young people so that they can stay in the areas in a village locations. But why are developers being let off and the affordable housing percentages not being followed according to the LDP policy? Because off-site provision is no good because it doesn't provide housing in that particular locality.
Well, we're lucky that that's not happening in our rural areas because we brought in this 60% affordable housing policy. That's a no-nonsense policy. You deliver the 60% affordable housing or it doesn't come forward, and they are being delivered. We've got one that has been built and we've got a number in the process. So they're very successful, and they came about when we weren't very successful with rural exception sites. We had farmers and landowners coming to us and saying, if you allowed a small percentage of market housing, we would bring our land forward. So we did come up with that policy. We're the only people trying that policy, and it has been successful. I think we'd do it again.
Okay, sure. Ruth?
Just as well, as Shirley said about, and Councillor Brown, when you have got new build in the countryside, in small villages, they're usually the rural allocation, so that there aren't people from towns or something that can come out there. There is a precedence for those who are living in that area, whether old or young, that can have first bite of the cherry, so to speak, for the rural allocation.
Sorry. But they still seem to not necessarily go in relation to the percentage of affordable housing that they're supposed to do, and allow monies to be paid instead for off-site housing. And that's what I'm talking about, not following the policy and basically therefore not helping the affordable housing situation in areas where there is development allowed in villages. Thank you.
I think the policy is quite clear within the rural aspect. It's 60%. Well, policy has to be adhered with, and if it's not adhered with, I think the allocation, because my next question to you, Shirley, is going to be the issue with the national parks. I don't know if many of you know this, because it's all about monies. This is about the SHG grant. If we want to go into a bigger debate about allocations and the economics of it, I think that'd be economic development and social, strong communities, etc. Cameldon site in Gilwan, which you've got on your list here, has delivered 18 affordable homes. Yeah, is that correct? Why is it some of them homes have been sold already when they had probably SHG to build them, or is that not correct? Because I did send you an email about this one. So we delivered affordable homes, 18, and then some of the home owners have actually purchased their properties. So we haven't delivered 18, we've probably delivered 17 or 6. Am I right or wrong? I just need an explanation on that one, because it's been asked to me, because that came up in a query. And my last question is in the national parks, which I'm from, when you deliver affordable homes, if you don't deliver an affordable home, any planning application has to give a commuted sum for the affordable home pot. So if you build one house and the value of that house is, let's say, £500,000, they've got to give the national parks approximately £100,000 for the affordable housing pot. Do we ever see any of that money? Will it ever come to Monmouthshire?
That's a lot of questions. First of all, I'd like to answer Councillor Brown. The 60% affordable housing policy, we have not taken a commuted sum, nor will we take a commuted sum. Those houses have to be on the ground. So we're taking commuted sums from single dwellings because obviously they can't provide an affordable house. So it's 30% of one dwelling. We are taking a commuted sum for that. But the 60% we have not taken a commuted sum and we won't. They are all going to deliver on the ground. I carry on with you.
And come on to are you happy with that, Councillor Brown?
Well, I do know of a development where there's been outline planning permission in a village which effectively hasn't followed those rules, and that's fairly recently. Thank you.
Shirley, can you just give me an answer to the two?
If I could know which one it was, then I could.
Well, I could get in touch with you after the meeting then. Thank you.
Okay. The Kymeldon site, there's 18 affordable homes. Some of them were low-cost home ownership. That's why they would have been sold as low-cost home ownership to people from our housing register. The park, we had a long wrangle with the park over commuted sums. They have insisted on holding those themselves. They won't pass them over to the housing authority. There is £176,000 outstanding from the Kymeldon site that should be paid. The park haven't come to me yet and said that's been paid. They will hold the money, and then I will have to try and spend it in Monmouthshire. If I can't spend it in Monmouthshire, they will spend it elsewhere in the park, and that's why they're holding the money, because that's what they want to do. With their single dwellings where they're asking £100,000, I don't think any of those have happened because it's a very large sum to find. I think I've only got 2 commuted sums that I know of that they are going to be paid.
Shirley, in your answer to my earlier question, you mentioned an upcoming housing development in Abergavenny, and I guess that you probably meant the one at the top of the Mardy. I believe that the developers there have been quibbling around the cost of having to bury the electricity wires that are currently on pylons. Could you give me a reassurance that if there are any changes in the planning around that development, that it will not affect the number of affordable housing in the scheme?
Well, the undergrounding of the electric cables, the electricity cables, that's over £5 million, and that has affected the affordable housing. We should have had 35%, and I think it's about 19.8 that we're getting on the site, and that's been negotiated.
Councillor? And then Roger.
I wonder if you could then confirm to me that in the original costings that were worked out between the local authority and the developer, that the assumption from the start was that the electricity cables would be underground, and that the developer is now bringing this forward, potentially, in my view, as a way of getting that reduction in affordable housing.
Well, I think, in fairness, that's a question for my planning colleagues. I wouldn't have been involved in that. That was costed during the LDP. I believe the utility gave us a cost, and it now far exceeds the cost that the utility company gave us for the LDP.
Okay, Roger, last one.
Thank you, Chair. It really is important. I mean, these are planning issues, to be perfectly honest, and I can assure members who aren't on the planning committee that we don't let anything go easily, and in particular where there's contention and the percentage of affordable housing on a particular site doesn't come anywhere near, we are assured that the independent district valuer looks at, I mean, they're put through our what's the word for it, toolkit, yes, in any case, and then any problems there, the district valuer comes in, he's independent, and if we I mean, you have to take advice from somebody like the district valuer, and if the district valuer office says that this scheme is not viable, if you go ahead asking for that number of affordable housing, then the planning committee obviously takes notice of it. We are acutely aware of the number of affordable houses that we need, and we know we're never going to get anywhere near it, and we don't let any opportunity go without a big fight. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Roger. Right, no more questions. Shirley, thank you for your report. Would members like to see projected deliveries? We do have a couple of documents there, don't we? Like you've got here, we could actually send them through what areas are having what in the next 6 or 8 months. Shirley, can we just make sure we send members? Yeah, they've all got a copy, yeah. Yeah, and I meant up-to-date ones as well when we start delivering the sites. I think that's it, nothing else. Thank you for your report, Shirley, and keep the good work going and keep getting the money off the Welsh Government. The one thing which I did forget to inform members, and I want to just ask Shirley, if we do not use our allocation, does that mean one of the other authorities can take it and we have it back when we're ready because of, i.e., planning, etc.? Does that still happen?
What would actually happen is it stays with WAG because obviously they hold the money, and then they would redistribute it. What they're talking about now, because there is so much money available and there will be authorities who can't spend, they're talking of me being able to lend a Newport money, and then I would get it back next year, for example, if you had a neighbouring authority. But obviously I'm trying to spend every penny we get so that we don't have that situation.
Okay. Mark?
Yeah, Shirley may not say it, but actually she's known throughout the sector of being a safe pair of hands that is able to utilise any spare money. So actually, we derive quite a lot of ad hoc social housing grant money towards late in the programme when Welsh Government are actually looking to utilise that, if that's any reassurance to you.
Without the money, we won't be able to deliver a lot of these projects. There's no doubt about that, because we do know the builders, the developers, they're not prepared to give an inch on it all, are they? So we need the SHG, and long may it continue. Thank you, Shirley. Thank you, members. Right, Mark. Tyrone. Revenue and Capital Monitoring Report. Just want to run us through this, guys. Thank you. Claire, you here? Any questions? You answer any questions if you can. If not, we'll get them at a later date. Right, thank you.
Just really to explain our style on this, I mean, more often than not, members will see me at a select, but commonly when it comes to any specific reporting aspect, whilst it's my report, you'd be better off listening to Tyrone, who actually has a more detailed understanding of social care more generally. So whilst I'm here today, it's really just to introduce myself to you as members, and I'd pass over the report for Tyrone to take you through.
I'll just introduce myself again. It's a couple of familiar faces I see from past, yeah, it is, but a couple of new ones that I'm not familiar with as well. So my name again is Tyrone Stokes, and I'm the Finance Manager for Social Care and Health. Taking you through agenda item 8, so I'll start on page 41, and I'll take you through the 2016-2017 year-end outturn position. The salient points I'd like to draw your attention to at the bottom of page 41, if you look at recommendations on point 2, the first one is to note the overall net council outturn position for the year was an £884,000 underspend. Note the intended use of that underspend to replenish reserves as per 2.5, and the capital outturn was slightly below budget for year-end outturn. What that means for social care, if I take you to page 43, and the final outturn performance for social care and health as a directorate was an overspend of just over £1 million. If we look at some of the bottom line adjustments to the social care and health bottom line, that will bring it to 984,000, which is £1,000 within the Q3 prediction. If we look more closely at the performance and the portfolio that sits under Adult Select, if I turn your attention to page 48, and the position for Adult Select was an overspend of 492,000, and the main pressure was within community care. Within community care, there's two pressures, mainly Chepstow older adults team and the mental health care team. Within Chepstow, we've had demand for long-term placements of clients that have previously been self-funding, but their capital has dropped below the threshold as per Welsh Government legislation, and they've presented themselves to local authority for consideration for financial support. Within mental health, we've had pressures within DOLS, deprivation of liberties, increases in Section 117 funded placements, and we've seen a sharp increase in residential placements. The impact on the adults' bottom line in the context of reviewing mandated savings has been detailed on page 50. And within social care and health, we had mandated savings for the year of 640,000, of which that's all within Adult Select portfolio. 12,000 was achieved, 628,000 wasn't achieved, and that sits within a practice change mandate, which is a pre-existing one, that sits within community care. If we look at adults, just putting into context for some of the newer members, over the past 4 years, we've taken out £2.9 million worth of savings out of adult care, and we have delivered 2.3 million. The only year we haven't delivered to our mandated savings has been this year, being 2016-2017. If I take you for a quick update on the capital programme, which is detailed in page 50, trying to find the right page, 53. Within Adult Selects, we haven't got a very big capital programme, circa 88k for the financial year 16-17, and we had a slight underspend of £7,000 at year-end outturn. I'm happy to take any questions or elaborate on anything any further.
Members, any questions? Can I just ask a quick question? We did have a couple of requests to Cabinet last year for extra funds for support for teams. Is that built into this as well? Because you've got to find that then. If you found one-off payment to reorganisation to do that, how did that balance out with the mandates for this financial year? Because that figure then would have to be added to last year's outturn of the budget, correct? So it must have increased.
In terms of what you're saying, I think what you're alluding to is some of the pressures the Welsh Government have put on us. For example, they've increased the capital threshold for people who are having long-term residential placements. That was set at 24,000. The manifesto by the government is looking to increase that to 50,000 over the next 3 to 4 years. This financial year being 17-18, that's increased to 30,000. We did petition, give figures for extra funding, and we have got extra funding, but it's by way of a grant, but that starts in 17-18. Okay. That's not backdated, so we haven't got any retrospective funding for that.
Morning, Tyrone. You were saying that more have gone into residential care. Any particular reason for that?
We have seen a pressure in the south, and that's where people who were previously self-funding have just run out of money, and they've dropped below the threshold at that point in time in 16-17, which was 24,000. We have to, by legislation, consider themselves for funding. It's quite rigorous. We ask them for a financial assessment form. We ask them where the money's gone, so we try and work out if there's been any deprivation of capital. But if not, then we do have to consider them for funding. If there's any property attached to that, we do attach a legal charge to the property, and then the property has to be sold then to pay for their care.
Also, is there availability for, if that is the trend, you know, how can you, you know, sustain, you know, more pressure on residential care?
Yeah, in terms of residential care sufficiency, there is sufficient provision within the county. We've got our one in-house residential care home, which is Severnview in the south of the county, and there is sufficiency when we do our market analysis of private residential and nursing care within the county. From a practice point of view, what we've seen over the last 5 years is that despite the demographics that we're facing and the increase in numbers, particularly of the over 85s, that our use of residential care has remained static. It did come down about 5 years ago and then has remained static ever since, with a slight increase last year. What we are seeing from a practice point of view is, you know, obviously an increase in terms of people with dementia and sort of that advanced stage of dementia, which despite all that we've done around care at home, there does come a point for some people where a care home placement is the right thing for them.
Also, when you say there's availability in the south of the county, I mean, I'm north of the county, but, you know, is there any likelihood that obviously the same pressures are going to be across the county, and is there any care then to the north?
Yeah, there's sufficiency across the piece. I think I've worked in other counties prior to the last 18 months when I've been here, and what you see in other counties is that the council is responsible for funding and purchasing a far higher proportion of care home placements than we are here in Monmouthshire, where we've been about 10% of the market. We purchase. What we will start to see as the capital threshold policy of Welsh Government, which is to increase within this Welsh Government term up to 50,000, us becoming a bigger player in purchasing a higher proportion of care home placements, and that takes us into a different relationship with the sector. So today, when it's become time that we have responsibility for placing people, we have found that there's enough supply to meet the demand. As our share of the market increases, I suspect that we'll start to have a different relationship with the care home sector as we become a bigger purchaser of that care, which we inevitably will as more people become our responsibility.
Councillor Brown.
Obviously, if the threshold is changing, is the Welsh Government going to assist? Because obviously that will place more of a demand on the budget in terms of people who, you know, aren't able to provide for themselves.
Welsh Government has come up with a funding stream by way of a grant, and kicked in now this financial year being 17-18. So we'll track all of those people that are dropping below the current capital threshold limit of 30,000, report that to Welsh Government, and that secures our grant funding for that purpose.
Mark, just want to...
Yeah, so it is, yeah.
Sorry, Chair, so it will cover the demand, the extra demand that will be created by changing the threshold then?
We've got a different calculation. I think the demand is more than what the Welsh Government put on the table by way of a grant. But I suppose what they want from us now is the activity data to support that. So from the 1st of April, we've been tracking all of those people that the capital threshold limit is dropping below, and the true cost to us as an authority. So when we have to do monitoring reports, we'll say, okay, then we've pulled down this grant, but it's actually costing us X amount based on the activity.
Mark, just let Mark come in.
Just for a point of clarification, and cynically, I would say no. It's not been my experience in the past when they've volunteered any additional responsibilities to local authorities that it's been backed by a pound-for-pound increase. We have experience of living wage, we have experience of independent living fund, where the responsibility is passed to a local authority, and there is some resources that comes with it, but generally it is not enough to satisfy the demand.
Okay, Councillor Grucott.
This may be for Claire, actually, but over the last 20 years or so in schools, there's been a huge, dramatic increase in the number of young people on the autistic spectrum. And that is now feeding through into adult services. In all the budgeting that's been done, is provision there for those adults who will, in essence, never really be able to be independent members of the community?
I guess to date, there's been budget set aside as part of our overall learning disability budget, which would support people with on the autistic spectrum, as well as people with more advanced or different types of learning disability. One positive in this financial year, and certainly for the next 3 years, is that Welsh Government have chosen the Greater Gwent region for investment in something called an integrated autism service, which is an all-age service from for children, young people, right through into adulthood. We, as an authority, are hosting that service for the rest of Gwent, because we've developed some expertise in the area of autism, and people that we have working for us are already quite used to working across the age spectrum. So that would be something which would be very helpful to bring back into a select, perhaps a joint select between adults and children at some point during the year.
Okay, I did have another hand up there. No? No? Okay, thank you both. Wish you well. Please remember, this document will come to full council as well. This is the outturn for financial 16-17, so it's Cabinet. We added it Cabinet, didn't we?
It went to Cabinet and then it comes...
Signs off.
The next cycle goes round to select, but I'm not aware that it goes to Cabinet.
Does the outturn of the budget not get signed off at full council? Does it not?
No, you will have the statement of accounts.
Well, it is what this is, though, isn't it? So the statement of account, which is what this is, we're going to full council, so we can't change anything, but I'm sure if any more questions you think of, you can ask within the other portfolios. Yeah?
That's fine.
Yeah? Okay. Everybody happy? Right. Thank you both. Take care. Have a good day. Right, Claire, number 9. Social Services Chief Officer Annual Report. As we said previous, just give us a quick run through. It's only a statement.
Thanks very much, Chair. What I'm here to advise you of this morning really is the process which is underway at the moment to get me to the point of the 27th of July, when I will be presenting my full annual report through to Council. It's a statutory requirement on me to present a report on the state of wellbeing and social services in Monmouthshire to full council, and what I'm in the process of doing at the moment is to gain views on the content of that report and analysis, and both in terms of the strengths and where we're doing well, and in terms of the areas for development. In terms of that annual report, it's a transitional year, because we had new legislation, very major new legislation in social services in Wales, which was enacted from the 6th of April this year. And that's groundbreaking legislation. It updates some legislation which in social services terms was 50 years old, things like the National Assistant Act. Up until this year, we'd been quoting in adult services. So that the format of the report, for those of you who are returning members, will look a bit different from reports that you'd seen previously, because nationally it's prescribed how we report against the elements of those reports. It's very much my personal professional view. It's one of the few things which you will see coming forward to council where there won't be a cabinet member presenting. Indeed, when I take the report through cabinet on the 5th of July, I will be asking Cabinet's opinion, but I may or may not choose to incorporate that opinion. And that would be very interesting if I chose not to, wouldn't it? But it's very much, you know, if anybody is interested or a bit anaraki, my duties as statutory director are set out in Part 8 of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, and I have to have a degree of independence when I bring that analysis through to council, but I will be asking lots and lots of views in the way up to that. In terms of my approach, what I try to do is balance the strengths within wellbeing and social services in Monmouthshire with those areas for further development. It's very easy when you're drafting an annual report to give perhaps an overly positive spin on things. It's very easy to fall into the other sort of trap and just focus on everything that needs to still be done. So it's important that balance in there. And I hope that as a select committee, when I talk within the annual report about what the priorities for improvement are, that you will see those as being very relevant to your work programme for the coming year. In terms of adult services, what I will be highlighting in terms of strengths is the fact that we've made real progress towards well-being as well as social services. given our demographics, given the pressures that we have on us, if we do what we always have done in social services, then, you know, we'd pretty much be bust as a social services authority very quickly, and that would have a real impact for the rest of the council. But it is also the right thing to do to connect people to well-being opportunities within their communities, to support them to make natural friendships, to bring together partners in local areas, to really have an approach around well-being and community support, which means people either don't come to our front door in terms of social services, or if they do come to our front door, then the level of support they need from us is less than it otherwise would be. The other strength I will be highlighting for adult social services is around the practice, the social work practice of our practitioners. What I shall be saying in my analysis is that adult social care, social work practice here in Monmouthshire, and I take no credit for this because it started long before I got here, has really informed and driven some of those national policy changes, that instead of having conversations with people about what's wrong with them, we have conversations with people around what matters with them, what their strengths are, what contributions they want to make, and then come to the barriers that they have to overcome to live the lives they want to live, and then that informs what the care and support plan is, rather than, as used to be the practice in adult social work, tell me all the things that are wrong with you and I'll give you care to overcome those. And then the final strength for adult social services I will be highlighting is that we have really started to move to models of support when people do need care and support, which are based on relationships rather than, you might have heard this phrase when in the media when people are talking about home care, particularly task and time, and you go in and you've got your 10 minutes or your 15 minutes to do things. We've remodelled in-house care to be very much relationship based and flexible around the needs of the person, and the needs on the day might differ from the needs on the next day. And there's really good examples of that through Monmouthshire Care at Home, which started as a project in Raglan but is now right across the whole of the county, and in learning disabilities through the My Day, My Life day opportunities. And then in the last year we've developed something called My Mates, which is a relationship finding service for people with disabilities. So those are the positives. The areas for development, obviously how we face and manage those demographics, which we're facing as a council, those increasing numbers of over 85s in particularly. Further developing that partnership approach within localities and communities. Lots and lots of the solutions, far more than are within social services, are outside of social services, and we've got to make sure that we're aligning all the resources that different partners and communities themselves have to maximum effect. Continuing to develop practice. So I've been very positive about practice, but sometimes our practitioners are not as good at recording what they do in a way that makes sense to the person. You know, they go back to old professional speak when they do that. So continuing to support practitioners there. And then the most critical issue for us in Monmouthshire, quite a common issue across the UK and Wales, but particularly acute here because of our rurality, because of our age profile, which means it's very difficult to recruit people of working age to work in care, is the care sector. So I've been very positive about the in-house care service. We're working with the other 90% of long-term care, which is provided by independent sector, private providers in the county, through something that we've called Turning the World Upside Down, to move from the way that we've commissioned that service traditionally into relationship-based care. And in doing that, we've got to address workforce issues in terms of making the care sector more attractive and really promoting it, developing career pathways for people, and we've got to address terms and conditions and a fair price of care as part of that. So it's a really challenging piece of work, but something I'm sure which as a select you will want to come back to. We've also got to make sure that in terms of development that we're supporting all of people's outcomes, so it's not just about relationships and living the lives you want to live in terms of daily activity. People with learning disabilities, for example, 85% of them will tell us they want to work. 5% currently are in paid employment. What can we do as a whole council and with our partners to address things like that? Safeguarding, we'll come on to the safeguarding report in a moment, but there's new statutory responsibilities around adult safeguarding, and we've got to make sure those are understood across the council and with partners as well as within adult social services. And then the effectiveness of regional working. We are statutorily required to work in regional partnerships. We've got some really good examples where we've developed things organically, like shared lives for people with disabilities, a different accommodation solution, but there are things which are mandated, like working towards pooled budgets for care homes, which I think are really going to challenge us over the next while. Financially, the report contains a financial analysis. As we've heard already this morning, it's going to be hugely challenging. We know that paying for care is a vexed issue which hasn't really been ever resolved at a policy level, and we know that what analysis there has been, and there's been quite a lot actually, shows that social care in Wales is facing a 4.1% pressure year on year. This is work from the Health Foundation, which outstrips the pressures on the NHS, and then we look at the budgets available and where Welsh Government directs resources, and so that's a real challenge. And then paying for care, as I've already said, and us as commissioners giving a fair price for care. So we live in that rural area, we have the demographics, we have that lack of ready workforce supply. We've had good support from the council over the years as the whole of social services and as adult services as part of that. But as we're looking at our medium-term financial plan, what we need to be doing is making sure that we've got plans for the next 4 years from a service and financial sustainability point of view set out and properly scrutinised as part of that. So my overall analysis is that we're well placed, but we are about to face challenges even more severe than all the challenges that we faced to date. And we need to be front-footed on that, and we need to be very open and transparent. So there'll be lots of further opportunity for comment and input into the annual report on the lead up to the council meeting at the end of July. There's a CYP Select later this week, which will particularly focus on the children's aspects within the annual report. There's a seminar on social services where I'll make some highlight a lot of the issues that I've highlighted for you this morning, which is also on Thursday of this week. We've got an event with partners on Friday of this week. We have Cabinet, where I'll be asking their views on the 5th of July. And then we've got that council meeting at the end of July. And as I say, what I'm really hoping is that those issues that I've highlighted will inform your Select Work programme. So thanks very much.
Okay. Questions? Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I've noticed on page 10 of the report, it talks about obviously, connecting with families and friends and so forth in terms of getting in touch with the community. Obviously, some of the problems may be due to the fact that people are isolated and don't necessarily have family nearby, or they've got to a point of problems with mobility and therefore can't get out and about to see any friends they may have as much as they could. The other issue is obviously to do with the the loneliness problem that basically is just about everywhere, and whether or not in terms of a preventative strategy, one of the problems being is that if people or families contact social services about an elderly person in need of care, the problem is that the barriers there in terms of the person's own pride and independence, when they need a little bit of assistance, how do you overcome that problem? Because that is one of the difficulties, because you don't necessarily want to say, almost social services is seen as almost emergency services, whereas if there was some way of promoting a sort of service, just coming in to give a bit of a hand, how do you get over that particular barrier? Because I do know, of circumstances where that sort of thing has happened.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Loneliness, social isolation is a scourge. It's a bigger public health issue for our older population than smoking, obesity, all those things which from an NHS point of view, we put a lot of time in. I think what we've started to be really skilled at is making those connections with people who are lonely, isolated, who've got, as you say, a lot of pride there in terms of wanting to live the life and keeping their independence, and social services is really seen as a toxic brand. People don't want to be involved with social services unless they absolutely have to. So places like Mardy Park in the north have been so effective in bringing people in, enabling them to make those connections, enabling them to continue to make a contribution. We've got people in their 90s who are volunteering now rather than being recipients of service. They are contributors too. And that's the way forward and the approach, making these things available, you know, the community really being the eyes and ears. So Mrs. Jones didn't put her bin out for a few weeks. You know, what's going on there? You know, Mr. Smith, you know, he always used to go to church on a Sunday. He hasn't been. So the strengths really are within our communities. And what we're trying to do is make sure there's enough people who are in those connecting roles, not social services, not social workers, but really good community workers who can link people into those opportunities for connections and friendships. And then if there's a bit of social services need, that's almost a byproduct of getting people motivated and connected in. When people do need care and support, and there are obviously people who are housebound, you know, and have come to that point, the sort of approach we've had through Care at Home Monmouthshire, the Raglan now into right across Monmouthshire, is to base that support on relationships. So our care workers will take people out, they'll connect different people on their runs together, even if they're in quite advanced stages of dementia. So I think that's really important to go right through from preventing people to get into our front door, and even when people are in quite high levels of care support, to really base it all on relationships.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I was just thinking that really basically sort of a helping hand type of brand, you know, advertised to people to say, you know, these are the people who could come in, you know, to help with your shopping, to check your food levels and the various other things, would be, and taking away the social services brand would be a way of overcoming that barrier, and it doesn't seem to be available anywhere as far as I know.
Roger?
Thank you, Chair. It is available. If you look on the Age Cymru website, what they do and what they are able to do for anyone that actually contacts them is amazing. Age Cymru came to Action 50 Plus in Abergavenny, and if you contact them, the list, as I say, of what is possible is amazing. I recommend that you do that.
And I think one of the things we're highlighting, and this is one of the priorities for the next year, is to make sure people are aware what's out there. So there's lots available in terms of befriending, I say Age Cymru, you know, just a huge wealth. Within the report, when you see it, you'll see one of the figures just tries to map everything which is available in communities around information and advice and community resources. But we know it's only the tip of the iceberg. Now, there are things which have developed in the last year. So one of the things we've implemented in our region is something called Dawis, which is a website which tries to be a wellbeing resource so that you can access what's available in your community. That's as good as the information which is on it on the day, isn't it? That's the problem with any of these sort of resources. I'm not saying it's not a step forward, it is, but you know, community Facebook pages, the intelligence which exists within the community hubs, within village halls, those are the sorts of things we've got to really build on. There's such strengths in the Monmouthshire assets, which perhaps other areas don't have, which we've got to make sure come to the fore.
Can I just say, though, on that point, and I think probably someone's going to step in as well, we do have quite a lot of people out there who don't have that connection also. How do they get to the hubs? How do they have internet? Because a lot of people, you'd be surprised in Monmouthshire, actually haven't even got internet, don't even know how to use it. These are the vulnerable people that we have out there. You know, give my father a mobile phone, flipping heck, I spent a fortnight trying to show her how to use it. But you see what I mean? These people find it so difficult to make that connection, and I think we as a council have to actually probably do a lot more on that aspect. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, Chairman, I was about to say a similar sort of thing. I mean, obviously one of the problems is that not all elderly people are computer literate, and also the issue is it's got to be in the sort of medium that they understand. You know, it sounds like a communication issue of the resources that are available to assist. You know, I mean, things like leaflets in libraries or in village halls or whatever might actually be a more useful form than develop new internet sites that people don't even know the name of the sites. Okay.
Yeah, we had many discussion with the other selects there. We do actually send plenty of letters out from this authority, i.e. reg demands and all sorts, actually trying to make another way of engaging, maybe only once or twice a year, just feeding this information in. So there's a bigger picture here to look at. How do we attach ourselves to the vulnerable, the lonely people out there, and who actually don't go anywhere and they are lonely. I mean, I did a campaign. I live in a very rural area, not a town. Actually, when you go to some of them drives and go down them, they actually don't leave there. So how are they going to be engaged and the need that they want? Perhaps family members, maybe the connection, but if they don't see them for a week or a fortnight, who knows? We have to look at actually the engagement side of it for our vulnerable and our lonely people out there. I did have Roger, and then I have Ruth. Roger?
I think what we're trying to do, or what ideally we would like to do, is almost impossible, just to put it all together. But we must never forget that we are 43 of us here, representatives of our ward, and we are the focal point. If we get newsletters out to people in the ward with our point of contact and letting them know what we're there for, that's going to be a great help as well. Thanks, Chair.
Ruth?
Yeah, I identify solely with you as well, Chairman. I've been in a very rural area, and I think the generation of round about 75, 80, they're the make, do and mend, and they're independent, and it almost, you need to come back to the nosy Parker so that they're more observant. But also, families today are so busy. Being obviously from a large farming sort of family, the wives stayed at home, but not so much today. In the younger generations, they move about more, and if you're not careful, you're too busy to notice grandma or grandpa or something. A week goes so quickly, but somebody stuck at home down a drive, it's a very long time. They're very lonely, and not only that, they're so grossly independent that they do not willingly ask for help, and they don't necessarily go to the doctor once in 6 weeks, 6 months even. And so I think we have to be perhaps a little bit more wary of the people. And also now I find in my ward, there are more and more city dwellers coming out to live, and you haven't got that cohesion of the neighbourhood and the neighbours, and it's almost like a tunnel vision. But they're the people who are savvy with the technology, but those original ones are not. And I think if we're not careful, they slip through the net, and you can hear of tragedies of people being lonely, even in a built-up area. So, we can't even, divorce ourselves from that. People can be lonely in a built-up area also. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. Claire, are we virtually now on towards the end of your statement? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I just wanted to sum up, really, because I think what you're highlighting is something which we're acutely aware of, which is one size doesn't fit all. For lots of people, younger generations, sort of digital responses are very appropriate. People need people ultimately, don't they? However they connect with them, and we've got to make sure that our responses, really respond to the needs of the communities and the sort of that older generation, really, which we have so many of in Monmouthshire. And that's the role of our connectors within communities. It's the role of what we're trying to develop through our county youth service programme, the community leaders, and then making sure that they know, well, what's the best for Mrs. Jones? Is it befriending? Is that never going to work for her? Does she actually feel more comfortable and more independent if she's paying a paid trust in helping hands type service, because that helps her to retain what's important to her, which is that pride around how she lives her life. So that, I think, is something I can really take and make sure that I reflect in the priorities for next year. So thank you for that.
Okay. Yes, I've got Councillor Brown and then Councillor Pavey.
I mean, I don't know whether there's any scope to amend the report that's said, but I mean, in view of the discussion, it would be helpful if it did actually look at something about in relation to communication with elderly people, of the type of help that's available and how to get that message across in areas where the elderly aren't computer literate and they need to have printed documents or something of that nature, so they actually know what is available to assist. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Pavey.
Thanks, Claire. You emphasised how important the third sector is in Monmouthshire, particularly with the co-production of services. Have you, this may be in the report, so I apologise in advance, have you fully mapped the third sector offer across the county? Are we aware of all services that our third sector providers are delivering? And if not, is that something that we need to focus on, and obviously that needs to be constantly reviewed?
Yeah, I think we know part of the picture. I don't think we've got a full sense of what, that entirety of resource from third sector and, voluntary and community groups is. As you may know, we're developing a community development team within the council who are going to have particular areas which they're responsible for, and I would see that as a key part of their role, that resource mapping, mapping and gapping in a sense, understanding what resources are available within an area. Some of those, sometimes it can be a crowded space in some areas. We did a bit of work around sort of welfare rights, benefits, advice, and lots of people doing quite similar things, some gaps at the higher end around sort of tribunal type work, but lots of people doing the lower end stuff. And then where are the gaps in all of that within a community? So I think that is a really important piece of work for the next year, and it will always keep growing, won't it?
Could I just ask Claire then, so we're going to create a team to... Yeah. How are we going to measure that then? Will we have annual reports, or will we want to bring them in and see what the outcomes are of setting this new team up, and is it achieving what we'd like it to achieve? How are we going to do that one?
Yeah, I think anything we do, it's really important to get the measures right. So in terms of that whole wellbeing approach, we've been working with Public Health Wales and Swansea University to make sure we're getting the right measures in. And it's a mix, isn't it, between the short-term stuff and the short-term impacts and the longer-term, more generational things. And it's important that we don't lose either side of that. I'll obviously report annually, but I think as the team comes together, and it's not a team that's going to cost any more money, it's about using our resources more effectively. I need to stress that. It's important for you all to meet that team and to meet them both in here, but also, in your ward work, to know who your community development team member is for each of the localities in which you're ward members.
Okay, Roger, last one.
Yes, thank you. Just on that one, I forget how many times I've said it in this room and elsewhere. It can be two-way. For goodness sake, get the team to talk to us. It's vital. We know what's going on in our wards, or if we don't, we maybe know somebody who does. We're all part of the team, so please don't forget about us.
Okay.
That's a key message. You're a resource as well.
All right, thank you. Councillors, are you happy with the statement there? Have a good read of it as well, because you get another couple of challenges on this, something not happy with. We've made a very poignant point today about the connection, making sure that our needed within our rural areas are looked at, and it's not just about IT and everything else, that it will be difficult for a lot of them to have that connection. Ruth, you're quite right, a lot of them don't want that connection, but there's one day they will have to have that connection. So I'm sure in your document you can incorporate our comments, what we've made today. On Thursday it'll go to CYP as well, so hopefully Councillor Grucott and your team can have a look at that as well and make some points there, and then we'll feed it back in to Cabinet and then to full Council. All right, thank you, Claire. Can we go to our next item, corporate safeguarding? You're going to take this, not Kath, today, yeah?
Hey, Kath's sunning herself in Turkey, so you...
Well done, Kath.
I think she probably made the right choice. There's probably air conditioning in Turkey that
I don't
works,
know about that, I've just come
Anyway, we're probably challenging them for temperatures at the moment, aren't we? But thank you very much, Chair. This is a very significant policy which I would very much welcome your input into, in that it is a corporate safeguarding policy, which again will be en route to Council for their consideration and approval following scrutiny here. And
is
again,
that the 25th meeting on the 27th of July? That'll be the full Council,
Yeah.
the next one, yeah. So, okay, we get
Yeah.
another bash of it as well. And we're going to CYP with this as well?
And
on
yeah,
Thursday?
and it's also going to CYP Select as well. But very significantly, the policy that we've had to date as a council for safeguarding has been a policy which is really focused on safeguarding children, child protection, and particularly the responsibilities around education and childcare settings. This is the first time, and it reflects back to what I was saying a moment ago about the Social Services and Wellbeing Act and the new statutory responsibilities on public bodies around safeguarding adults. This is the first time that there will be a corporate safeguarding policy in which adults at risk, as they're termed within the policy and the legislation, and safeguarding adults at risk is on the same footing as safeguarding children. So from an adult select point of view, that's a really significant point for you to know. What the policy tries to do is to be comprehensive at a policy level on how we do our work. It sets out the legislative policy. It sets out our governance arrangements. We have regional statutory safeguarding boards for children and for adults. And one of the things we may want to consider as a select over the next while is how we make sure that those regional arrangements are operating as effectively as we want to. We would want them to in terms of their leadership role of safeguarding. It's safeguarding in terms of Social Services and Wellbeing Act is set out statutorily, but there is other legislation which is of relevance in a safeguarding context. And an acronym for you, VAUDA SV, the Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Act, I think I've got it right, is another legislative frame which also has a regional board, but we've got statutory responsibilities around that locally as well. And then there is legislation around human trafficking, in slavery, and obviously all the anti-terrorism legislation and the prevent strategies are all referenced within this policy. So it's quite a comprehensive safeguarding piece from that point of view. What the policy then does is set out roles and responsibilities. Me as statutory director, my executive member as cabinet member, all cabinet members for their service areas, all heads of service, designated leads within directorates, and from an officer point of view that comes together in something called the Whole Authority Safeguarding Coordinating Group. How we quality assure members who are returning, and those who aren't will probably know about it very, very soon. We'll know about a very critical report that we had at the end of the last administration around safeguarding in a particular area of our operations from the Wales Audit Office. And one of the things which I frequently get asked is, how do you know that isn't the case anywhere else? Well, what we need to ensure and assure you and ourselves is that there are robust quality assurance mechanisms which mean that we're cited on what is the safeguarding strengths and areas for development across the whole of our business. And what the report talks about is the SAFE, which is a self-evaluating tool, and then the role of the Safeguarding and Quality Assurance Unit, which looks at the returns on those tools across adults and children. So it's the first time that those evaluations have picked up from service areas how well they feel they're doing against adults at risk and safeguarding adults. And in looking at those self-evaluations, is there further work that we need to do to follow up on the self-evaluation process? Safe workforce, and workforce includes our volunteer workforce. How we prevent safeguarding, and as we, a question I often will ask service managers as they come to me and they see safeguarding as a negative, to say, well, don't think of it as a negative. You're setting up a new service or something new you want to try. Identify your risks, manage and mitigate them. Don't let it be something that you do after the event. So how we are preventative in our approach. We highlight in the report, and activity from parts of our business like trading standards and licensing, where they're very effective at looking at potential risks and working with the trade and taxi trade to make sure that they prevent safeguarding incidents from actually occurring. Robust protection. So from your point of view as an adult select, you'll be particularly interested in the effectiveness of our POVA, protection of vulnerable adults arrangements, and then safe services in terms of how we commission. And for adult services, our commissioned services far outweigh those services we provide ourselves as a council. So how do we assure ourselves and assure you that what's happening out there through private providers is of the right quality and people are being safeguarded to the right extent there. So it's quite a sort of broad policy, and obviously because it's a policy, it's a relatively high level and there's lots of detail that sits beneath it. In terms of monitoring, what we will bring forward through Selects and then through into Cabinet and Council on a 6-monthly basis is a progress report against our safeguarding activity, and that will encompass adults at risk as well as children. And what we need to be minded of, and you need to be aware of as a committee and members as well, is that at some stage in the next year we will probably have a external inspection of our safeguarding arrangements, which may well be a joined up inspection between the Audit Office, CSSIW and Estin. So what's in this policy is really important because that's what we will get tested again. So any advice at this point, well, it's still got the draft through it, would be very gratefully received. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Questions, members? Roger?
Thanks, Chair. Interesting your last comment. This is a hugely detailed report, and we're all going to fail on this. Anyone in this room and anyone out there will surely be picked up on something in here. It's absolutely comprehensive. So we need to be prepared for that. If we're all as good as this report wants us to be, then we're going to be saints. But there's no reason why we shouldn't go for it. Can I ask who the Whole Authority Safeguarding Working Group are?
Whole Authority Safeguarding Coordinating Group are chaired by myself, and it comprises chief officers or heads of service from each directorate across the council, plus some colleagues from the Safeguarding and Quality Assurance Unit. So the aim of the group is to provide, and I hate the term but can't think of a better one, that golden thread between what's happening at directorate level, what's happening corporately, so that we've got that line of sight at all times, really, and then can appropriately advise members coming out of that.
So there's no member involvement?
No, there's not a member on that group.
Right.
I can certainly consider that. I think what we've got to make sure is that we've got effective governance, and I guess what I would ask you from a select point of view is, and it's very, very early days for you as a select, is whether the select arrangements provide enough assurance alongside the things which go to Cabinet and Council, or whether you feel the need to be on that coordinating, that officer group as well, which does the day-to-day operational business, really.
Okay, Roger. Well, let's go through it, and then we'll have a think about it. As a recommendation, you believe members should have
I think it's always good if they're willing to, some of them, go on.
I've got Councillor Grewcott and then Councillor Brown.
Some of us will get a chance to look at this again on Thursday at CYP, where we'll be able to focus more on the young people element of the policy. So just a couple of broader issues. The first is that there is a recommendation that all councillors are trained to at least level 1, and I think that's vital. Could I ask, assuming the policy is adopted, how quickly that training will be provided, and what happens if there are any recalcitrant members, because certainly that would be picked up in the inspection of the authority. I also note that part of your quality assurance team will be monitoring the effectiveness of scrutiny, and I wonder if you could possibly say a little bit about how that QA of our deliberations will take place.
In terms of the councillor safeguarding training, there is a session on the 10th of July at 2 o'clock. What we will need to make sure is that those members recalcitrant who don't attend that, because I'm sure we won't get a full turnout, are picked up, and that we have another session to make sure that every councillor receives that essential training. So that's in hand. In terms of the role of the Safeguarding and Quality Assurance Unit, I think it's important that they get to know Select, that they attend not just for the monitoring reports and the progress reports they themselves will be presenting, but they come in and dip in for other items. You know, one of the things that you'll find in every report is safeguarding implications, and sometimes you know, it's there almost as a standard sentence, isn't it? And it's not really scrutinised. On other occasions, I've seen those safeguarding implications being very, very heavily scrutinised in some committees when people are bringing forward reports. So I think it's important that they get across committees, not just the obvious ones, CYP and adults, but safer communities and economic development, to make sure that, you know, to scan the reports and say, well, that one has some safeguarding implications. I'll just go in and see how that's scrutinised, and then to reflect that back and you know, work with Hazel and yourselves really around supporting members to effectively scrutinise the safeguarding implications.
Could I just ask, though, on that point, before I let you in, Councillor Brown, would it not be within our interests as a council to have that checklist? Because when we do reports, i.e. what happened just before the last term of council, if that had been, that could have easily been picked up in another way. So where we have our equalities and everything else there, should we not actually put in there safeguarding? I.e., if you look at every report you have, we have the issue. Sorry, members, let me just find it. We have the future generations evaluation. Why are they never picked up in there then? Because it may be we can add something in there as reference to departments within the council, perhaps, so we can pick things up.
It is supposed to be in every cover report. You highlighting it to me now, Chair, is meaning that I'm noting perhaps a piece of work for me to ask the safeguarding unit just to perhaps take a random selection across committees and see whether everybody has highlighted what the safeguarding implications are, and whether we think, having highlighted them, it's just a stock phrase, or whether actually those safeguarding implications have been properly thought about. So I think that would be a helpful thing for the unit to look at.
Thanks. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you. One of the questions I was asking is, obviously there's, you know, training within the council itself and training for councillors, but the other issue is obviously volunteers, because they obviously the DBS is, as I understand, for volunteers is a free thing, but in terms of the training, I mean, quite often it's difficult enough to get volunteers. So what support can be given to volunteers, because you don't want to end up putting people off because of things that they've got to go through. I mean, obviously they do need to know something about safeguarding, but I just wanted to know how this could end up restricting voluntary time available and make volunteers less likely to volunteer.
I mean, in fairness to Owen Wilson, the leadership he's shown through the County That Serves programme, what we've tried to do is support volunteer training in a way that's proportionate, in a way that is delivered when they would naturally be available. So if they're volunteers within a school and they're coming in anyway, that it's delivered in the school setting. And that we will be bringing forward a new volunteering policy for consideration. And what that does is to rank volunteers within it in terms of the level of training that they need based on the role that they're fulfilling. Because it needs to be proportionate, but it also needs to be safe, and the balance between the two is important, really. We've got to make sure in the delivery of all of our training programme that it's done in a way that meets the need of the part of the service that we're talking about. We do need to be really clear that for the purposes of safeguarding, whether you're a volunteer or whether you're a paid member of staff, doesn't matter, because if you've got access and what you're doing is a regulated activity, you need that same level of training as if you were an employed member of staff to do that. And that's a really important message to get across.
Okay. Any more questions on the report? No? Thank you, Claire. Sorry, Roger.
Yeah, going back to Appendix 2. Blank. Unless it's just something on mine.
What page is that, Roger?
It's page 26 of the report, 105 on the bundle. Referral process children.
There you go.
Should there be something in there?
Yes, there should.
And on page 48, 127, there's another blank page which doesn't say this page is intentionally blank.
Yeah, with the referral process children, what it's obviously done on my version that I'm looking at for formatting purposes, it's gone down onto the next page.
Oh, okay.
And then it's 3.2.5 flowchart, because the flowchart has been pasted, I think, from the All Wales Child Protection. So yeah, it's
I see.
It's
But
a formatting
it's got
issue, I think.
appendix 3 at the bottom, so it's...
And then Appendix 3 should... what I'll have to do for the version now for councillors, make sure that the formatting is absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that Appendix 3 relates to the role description for the safeguarding lead.
So anyone else, the public out there, think, what's all this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll get somebody more skilled than me to look at the
Because
format.
look at
Somebody
page
just
48
proof
of the
it
report as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know,
Page 48 as well.
make
Claire.
sure it's not slipped.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah.
Councillor.
Being terribly pedantic, page 14, there's a flow chart of corporate safeguarding policy and the levels that people with different responsibilities will need to be at. The top one is basic awareness training, and it says there counsellors not working directly with children. Then the next one down says level 1. Counsellors who do work with children, but the report itself says all counsellors should be trained to level 1, and I would urge you to accept that.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah. Right, any more questions? No? Thank you, Claire. And pass our regards to Kath Sheen, reference to the report as well, okay? And you, Cabinet and full council, yeah? Yes. All right, so any more thoughts you have from your meeting on Thursday or whatever, we always get another go at it as well, all right? Thank you. Agenda item number 11 is the action list, which is from the previous select. Hazel, take us through that.
One of the actions from the previous select was to continue further scrutiny of stroke services with the Health Board. I think this is something that you might want to consider at your next meeting when we have a sort of discussion, a proper discussion around the work programme, and we can sort of bring you up to speed with the recommendations made by the previous committee in terms of further scrutiny of stroke services. But we, just for new members' purposes, really, we've had continued scrutiny on stroke services, and we invited the Stroke Association and also the Health Board to come and do a presentation on the different services. We had some service users here, people who've had strokes, people supporting people who've had strokes. So it was a very useful meeting. So it's not a case of perhaps redoing the whole meeting for the new committee, but there were a few recommendations to be taken forward. So I propose to bring you at the next meeting a sort of discussion on the work programme where you can identify some of the things going forward from the sort of discussion you've had with Claire today, but also a meeting that was held between the chair and officers yesterday to sort of identify future issues for scrutiny. In terms of the ambulance service, I don't think it was asked that they come back to the committee. We suggested that we needed to sort of raise awareness as defibrillators, and just to confirm to members, there is a defibrillator here and it's downstairs, and it's in reception. So we checked that following that meeting. Furthermore, for the next select meeting on the 11th, There are several sort of actions there which are more to do with the work programme, really, in terms of continuing the dialogue with the prison in relation to the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. We discussed that yesterday in our session with the Chief Officer, and we feel that possibly in about 18 months' time we'd be sort of worth having a discussion on how we're doing since the implementation of the Act, 18 months down the line, and at that point it might be worth having a dialogue with the prison. Also, we talked about ongoing dialogue with the Community Health Council, and I think when we next decide to have scrutiny with the Health Board on issues to be decided by this committee, but we've got some suggestions of things you might want to discuss with the Health Board, it might be worth inviting the CHC at that time. Supporting people, the recommendation there was to include that in the future work programme, and that is quite an important thing that comes to us annually. Chris Robinson brings a full report on the spend that we have allocated to us and how we've managed with those monies and what we've delivered. So that's something that we can put forward for the work programme. But just to say, Chair, in terms of the Adult Select work programme, which is the next item on the agenda, item 12, again, you've only got what you've got in front of you today, but for the next meeting I think it would be worth having a discussion on the work programme, but also discussing the co-option of this committee, because previously you've had members co-opted on this committee from Action 50 Plus. We didn't have a fair representation across the council. We didn't have any representation from the south of the county, and we now have an Ageing Well Forum in place, which has a greater pool from which you might choose to draw any co-option. So I would just urge you really to think between this meeting and perhaps the next meeting, if you think there are any sort of organisations or individuals that you feel would be useful to co-opt onto the committee, then we can discuss that next time. But bear in mind, people don't always have to be co-opted onto a committee. We've got a good sort of track record of bringing in specific people such as Stroke Association, different witnesses as and when we need to. That's not to say that the previous co-opted members didn't add a dimension, because they did. They added great value to the committee, but we need to sort of think about how we can perhaps represent the county better in terms of geographical spread and also the electorate. So we'll have a think about that at the next meeting. I'll just bring you back to the Cabinet and Council Forward Work Programme, which I've asked officers to begin populating because it is quite sparse, and we need to have a forward plan for all decisions and strategies that are coming forward for at least the next 6 months. It's a responsibility to publish that online for the public, but also it guides you in terms of setting your work programme by knowing which things are coming forward that you might want to consider pre-decision scrutiny on. If the planner is populated properly, then there might be single member decisions in there that you might want to just have a look at, or ask the report author to email you the report. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything needs to come to scrutiny, but it gives you a sighting of what decisions are being made in order that you can decide should you want to bring that forward. So I'm going to pass back to the chair now.
Okay, while we've got a bit of time, I will have 5 minutes to explain to new members exactly about the planner, because I know you're on other selects as well, and it is important. Hazel's quite right there, the planner is very sparse. What we've tried to do in the past is, generally on a Friday, the planner will be updated. So if you get an email with updated planner, it's so important as being with these selects that you look at that. Because there may be something on there actually just takes your eye, maybe something in your own area about some land or whatever. And as chairs, it's our responsibility as well to actually focus on that, because there may be some document, a policy or whatever, put into that planner. So we'll sit here today, tomorrow, Thursday and Friday, we'll have a new planner. There may be something included on that planner which actually is not here with us today. Well, we're not going to sit till the 25th of July, and just generally what happens, it may be a decision to be made next week or the week after or the week after that. So you won't even get a chance to even have a look at it. So what I do ask committee members is, if there's something which actually takes your eye, is make a couple of phone calls, speak to the relevant people if you're not sure about it, and if it's something of grave concern, then perhaps speak to the chair or Hazel. That's so important, because that's what makes us work, is this planner. Single member decisions are cabinet member, and that is it. He will look at that with his senior officer and make the decision. Cabinet decisions they will go to cabinet, so you do have another bite at it. What we don't want to do is have call-ins, so something serious coming through where it's an issue which we haven't been able to discuss, members aren't very happy about it, cross parties, you end up with call-in. And this is why we actually try to look at this planner and get it out there to everyone, so you can actually have a feed into it. So we've got the planner there, and if you do look at it, there's actually not a lot on there, bar Claire's 27th. Annual report, Director of Social Services, which is just explained to us, will be going to Cabinet on the 27th. There's nothing else on there until we get to 6th of September. So we've got the Church Fund, the working group. And then you go to the 2nd of September, audit accounts, formal approval. That was what I was saying, the outturn statement will come to us at Council, which Mark, we went through today. Nothing. There's nothing on there which just takes your eye. Review of fee and charges. That's just budget things. Then we're to December. So I think in the next few months, and that's going to be the important thing, we're going to see lots of things coming on here last minute. So as members, just take note. Friday, we'll encourage Democratic Services to keep it going on a Friday. Maybe you don't pick it up to Monday, Tuesday or whatever, but always make sure you can go onto the planner, all right? Now, they used to email out the amendments to the planner. It may be they may direct you to get to the planner from the hub, but I'll make sure as chair that that's easy for you, so you can just have a look at the updated planner every Friday. They do change it around sometimes, so it's very unfair, but we've tried to make sure that they keep it simple for us. I think that's all I have to say on that. Review and sure, speak to Hazel and myself about the planner, or Roger, or Ruth. We all know about it, because that's the most important thing for us. Okay. Discuss the times of the meetings. Are we still happy with a 10 o'clock, 9:30 start, 10 o'clock on a Tuesday? Everybody happy with that? Yep, okay. And you're happy with your 25th of July meeting? Yep, that's start the summer holidays for some. I think there's a risk of, I think generally we operate in July, and August is virtually the month where we quieten things off for holidays. But we okay for the 25th? Yep. Right. Thank you for your attendance today. I was going to say, any more questions? I'll take them. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I'm not sure about this, looking at this forward work programme. I mean, is there, it says possible future work programme items. Is there any scope for asking for reports on particular subjects at all, as opposed to task and finish groups?
I'm not a lover of task and finish groups, because on the basis of task and finish groups is, I notice with what I've heard is a lot of you are on 3 selects, maybe even 4. If you end up with task and finish groups, and then you end up with task and finish groups from each select as well, your time is going to be really taken back. I would say if we want to do a task and finish group, it will be in and out. We do it, we finalise it, don't run too many. 1 may be enough for this committee, but that is going to be up to you as a committee to decide. What your forward planner is, it is up to you. You know, I mean, I've got a couple of things that I think we should probably look at. You've probably got other things that you want to look at. I think the planner, we'll build ourselves. Policy will have to come first, i.e. have we got changing policy? And don't forget, we'll have quarterly budget monitoring to fit in as well in our meetings. And there'll be the corporate risk assessment. So there'll be all sorts of things which we'll have to do on top. Is there anything else I've missed?
Yeah. At the next meeting, the performance officer, who you've not yet met, would like to bring you a performance report on the sort of areas within your remit. Now, that's quite timely, because that should help you sort of identify areas for scrutiny. So this sort of discussion about what we want to scrutinise from here on, how you want to focus and prioritise your workload is what we'll do at the next meeting. That's what I propose you do, is have a think about things that you would like to scrutinise. From the meeting that myself and the chair held with the chief officer yesterday, we will bring forward some suggestions that they have identified as big issues on their radar in terms of service pressures, legislative changes, key policy decisions coming forward. So we'll bring you a list of sort of suggestions arising from that meeting yesterday. You need to come with your own suggestions of things that you feel we should scrutinise, and then bearing in mind the report from the officer on the performance of the directorate, that should help you sort of steer really where your priorities should be. But that I propose we do at the next meeting, because I mean it could take some time, and I think it's important not to rush it and to sort of put time scales against things, because for instance, if you want to invite the health board to a meeting to look at something specific, you do need to give them at least 6 months notice. From practice that we've had trying to set up meetings with them, it's not as easy as saying, can you come to the next meeting? So it would be really good if I had some steer from you of how you want to go forward, and you don't have to take forward the issues that the previous committee looked at. It's an opportunity for a blank sheet and for working forwards. And for instance, one of the things that was suggested yesterday at the work programme discussion was looking at mental health, and we've never looked at that before, and I think it's something that would bring a new sort of fresh challenge for the committee, and it is really timely. So I think come to the next meeting armed with some ideas if you can.
Okay. Councillor Bryan?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few ideas of reports I'd like to be put forward, but I don't know whether this is the appropriate place to mention them.
If they're within the portfolio of this select committee, email them to Hazel. We'll have a look, because I put her through to her as well. I'm sure other members have got some things, and they may be cross-cutting some of them. You know, I mean, we don't really know, but I think then we'll build it from there. I think Hazel's quite right, to get some of the organisations here, it's just not like we'll see you next month. That doesn't happen. So have a think. I think Claire has actually pointed to us today now there's severe pressures on them. I think we just need to be, there's lots of things out there which came out yesterday. I was really unaware of myself as well, and we there's quite a lot of work to be done here, but that's not to say that what you feel you want to look at, there may be a policy out there, maybe something which happened 6 months ago, maybe something out there we can even actually email a policy off to you, or something isn't working out there. You may have heard something that isn't working. We just need to look at it and find out why it's not working. The policy we just looked at, the safeguarding policy, if you think about it, the bigger picture here, Rochdale case, the case on the radio which has been going on, was it 4 years, which they couldn't even announce, about cruelty within our care homes. All them things are out there and we don't know they're happening. So these policies are so important for the people of Monmouthshire and the safety of our children, etc., vulnerable adults. But we can't do everything. I think it's just up to us to have a challenge there of what we think is most important.
Just to add to that, I mean, this select committee's remit, its terms of reference, which if you haven't seen it, I'll email them to the committee. The terms of reference cover everything from sort of leisure services to homelessness to mental health provision to support for vulnerable adults. It's not just what you would traditionally think as care services for elderly people. So it's quite an expansive remit, and it's worth bearing in mind what the committee's done before and signed off, and looking at things that haven't been done before. But it's up to you as a new committee to decide which way you'd like to go and where you'd like to focus. But obviously we've got some clear steers from officers of policies that they think are coming forward and are coming forward for the cabinet plan, and they've sort of given me some suggestions of things they'd like your input on. So yeah, we'll bring that to you at the next meeting when we can have a proper discussion about it, and also discuss future co-option, because perhaps that would help to sort of give you you a bit of a flavour of the breadth and the scope of this committee, and then you'll start to think, well, actually this person might be a relevant person to be involved, or this individual, and think about what's missing. Any co-opted people that you would choose to add to the committee wouldn't have voting rights. They would be in a non-voting capacity, but it's worth thinking about people that you'd want to have at every meeting, as in co-opted, or people that you might just want to invite occasionally as and when you see fit. So yeah, think about that, and then at the next meeting, I think, you know, come armed with some ideas, please.
Okay, anything else? No, thank you. Meeting closed.
Comment. I've had a great deal of difficulty in hearing you speak. This is an incredibly bad fan, which is why I went down to ask, please, can you